Chapters 1 through 6 of the Book of Daniel. Chapter 1. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, came in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, to Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Almighty gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his power, with part of the furniture of the house of God. And he carried them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he put the furniture into the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his high chamberlain, to select some of the children of Israel, and some of the royal family, and some of the nobles, boys in whom there was no defect, and pleasing in appearance, and to educate in every science, and have them taught in knowledge and trained in affairs, who might have ability in them to attend in the royal palace, and to teach them the alphabet and language of the Kasdim. The king also assigned them daily a portion of the royal food, and wine from his own altar, and to educate them for 3 years, and at the end for them to attend before the king. And there were amongst them from the children of Judah Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But the high chamberlain changed their names, and gave to Daniel Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. Daniel, however, decided in his heart not to pollute himself with the king's food, or wine from his cellar. So he requested of the high chamberlain that he might not be defiled. And God gave Daniel favor and acceptability with the high chamberlain. The high chamberlain, however, said to Daniel, "I am afraid of my master the king, who has appointed what your food and drink shall be, and he will observe your faces more gloomy than the lads who are around you, and I shall forfeit my head to the king." But Daniel replied to Meltzar, who had been appointed high chamberlain over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Pass by your servants, I pray, for 10 days, and give us grain to eat and water to drink, and compare our appearance for yourself with the appearance of the lads who eat the king's food, and do with your servants according to the result." So he listened to this request of his, and passed them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days he made an examination of the result, which was they were better and fairer in body than all the lads who ate the royal provisions. So he gave them grain. And God gave to these fair lads intelligence and skill in all books and science, and to Daniel understanding about all visions and dreams. And at the end of the period the king had commanded for their production, the high chamberlain brought them to the presence of Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king conversed with them, and found none amongst them all equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they attended in the royal presence, and in every matter of scientific knowledge that the king inquired of them about, he found them 10 times better informed than all the engineers and mathematicians who were in his whole empire. And Daniel lived until the 1st year of King Koresh. Chapter 2. It occurred in the 12th of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, and his mind was disturbed, and his sleep left him. The king consequently ordered to call the engineers and mathematicians and enchanters and kasdim to explain the king's dream to him. So they came and stood before the king. When the king said to them, "I have dreamed a dream, and my mind is disturbed to understand the dream." But the astronomers replied to the king in Aramaic, "King, may you live forever. Tell the dream to your slaves, and we will explain it clearly." He responded to the astronomers and said, "The purport has gone from me. But look, if you do not inform me what the dream was and explain it, you shall be cut in pieces, you slaves, and your houses be made a dunghill. But if you show the dream and explain it, you shall be given gifts and great honors. Relate therefore what I saw first, and show me the dream and explain it." They again answered and said, "Let the king tell to his slaves the dream, and we will explain its meaning." The king retorted and said, "I know assuredly that you are putting off, because you discover that the matter has gone from me. Therefore, if you do not inform me what the dream was, you have one fate. For you utter lies and rotten contrivances to talk before me till my mood changes. Look sharp, tell me the dream, when I shall know that you can explain its meaning." The astronomers replied to the king and said, "There is never a man on earth who is able to accomplish the king's demand, because no great king or ruler ever asks such a thing of any engineer, enchanter, or astronomer, and the statement the king demands is tremendous. And besides, there is no one who could accomplish it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not in flesh." Because of this, the king was angry and excessively furious, and ordered the destruction of all the scientists in Babel. And a decree was published to kill all the scientists, and they searched after Daniel and his associates to kill them. Daniel, however, met Arioch, the captain of the guards, who had been sent by the king to kill the scientists of Babel. He addressed and asked Arioch, the superintendent of the king, "On what account is the decree of the king so sudden?" And Arioch informed Daniel of the affair. Then Daniel rose and went to the king, and begged to be given a fixed time when he would explain it to the king. Daniel then returned to his house, and communicated with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions about the matter, and entreated them to request the God of heaven not to hide this thing, so that Daniel and his friends might not be destroyed with the rest of the scientists of Babel. After that the secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision at night, and Daniel thanked the God of heaven. Daniel addressed him and said, "Should not the name of God be blessed forever and ever? For wisdom and power are his, and he changes the times and appoints opportunities. He raises kings and depresses kings. He to the wise gives wisdom, and he gives knowledge and skill. He reveals the deep and the hidden. He knows what is obscure, and light resides with him. I thank you, God of my fathers, and praise for giving me science and power, and revealing what we sought from you, revealing the thing of the kings." In consequence of this, Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the scientists of Babel, and said to him, "Do not destroy the scientists of Babel. Bring me before the king, and I will myself explain it to him." Arioch consequently went in haste with Daniel to the king, and said to him, "I have found a man from among the captive Jews who can tell the king the meaning." The king then addressed and asked Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar, "Are you able to tell me the dream that I saw and explain it?" Daniel replied to the king and said, "The secret that the king demands, no scientist, enchanter, or engineer is able to decide and show to the king. However, there is a God in heaven who reveals the hidden, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in future times. Your dreams and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. From you, king, your thoughts ascended on your bed as to what would be after now, and the revealer of the hidden made known to you what will be. But not for any science that I possess more than any living has this secret been revealed to me, but with the object for me to make it known to the king, and that you might know the thoughts of your mind. You, king, were looking, and saw a great image. This image, which was great, and its splendor dazzling, stood before you, and its aspect was terrible. The head of the image was of fine gold, its breast and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of brass, its legs of iron, its feet part of iron and part of clay. You looked at it until a stone was cut without hands and thrown against the iron and clay feet of the image, and broke them to pieces. Then at once the iron, clay, brass, and gold were broken, and became like chaff from thrashing wheat, and the whole were carried away by the wind, and no rest was found for them. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain, and filled the earth. That was the dream. Now the meaning shall be told to the king. You, king, are a king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given this empire, its power, its might, and splendor. And wherever the sons of men reside, the beasts of the field and the birds of the skies he has given into your hand, and you rule all of them. You are the head of gold. But after you another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours, and another third kingdom of brass, which will rule over all the country. Then a fourth kingdom that will be as strong as iron, because as iron breaks and crushes all, so like iron it will break all in pieces and crush. And as you saw its feet and toes were formed part of clay and part of iron, that kingdom will be a divided one. Yet the firmness of iron will be in it, because you saw the iron mixed with tempered clay. So as the toes were part of iron and part of clay, part of that empire will be strong and part brittle. And as you observed the iron was mixed with the tempered clay, they will mix themselves with the races of mankind, but will not stick together with each other, as iron does not unite with clay. But in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will establish an everlasting empire, and indestructible, whose sovereignty will not be transferred to another people. It will subdue and break all the kingdoms, and will stand forever. And as you saw a stone cut from a rock, but not by hands, which broke the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has revealed to the king what will come after now, and the dream is certain, and my interpretation true. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and did reverence to Daniel, and commanded to present a gift and perfumes to him. Then the king addressed Daniel and said, I know by a proof that your God is a God of gods, who makes kings and reveals the hidden, since you have been able to disclose this hidden thing. The king afterwards promoted Daniel and presented him with great gifts, and made him governor over all the province of Babel, and president of all the scientists of Babel. Daniel, however, asked it from the king, and he appointed as administrators of the province of Babel Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but Daniel continued at the king's court. Chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar the king made a golden column, whose height was 60 cubits, and its breadth 6. He erected it on the plain of Dura in the province of Babel. Then Nebuchadnezzar sent to collect the viceroys, presidents, and lawyers, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the justices, and all the governors of provinces, to assemble for the dedication of the column that King Nebuchadnezzar had erected. Consequently, all the viceroys, the presidents, and lawyers, with judges, treasurers, the counselors, the justices, and all governors of provinces, assembled to the dedication of the column that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald proclaimed, It is commanded to you, peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, sackbut, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the column of gold that Nebuchadnezzar the king has erected, and whoever does not fall down and worship it shall immediately be flung into the middle of the burning fiery furnace. Consequently, at the time appointed, when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell and worshipped the golden column that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. However, at that time some men of the Kasdim approached and accused the Jews. They addressed King Nebuchadnezzar, May you live forever, king. Did not you yourself, king, appoint a decree for all men when they heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the golden column? And that whoever did not fall down and worship should immediately be flung into the middle of the burning fiery furnace? But there are men of the Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the province of Babel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men have not obeyed you, king. They have not fallen down to your God, and have not worshipped the golden column that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, commanded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be brought. And the men were brought before the king, when Nebuchadnezzar addressed and said to them, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, why do you not honor and fall down to my God, nor worship the golden column I have erected? However, are you prepared at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the column that I have made? If you will not worship, you shall be immediately flung into the middle of the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God that can deliver you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "We do not care enough about this decree to answer you. Be sure there is a God whom we worship, who is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, king. But if not, let it be known to yourself, king, that we will not reverence your God, nor worship the golden column you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the shape of his face was changed at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So in reply he ordered them to heat the furnace 7 times more than usual, and commanded the strongest men in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to fling them into the fiery furnace. Consequently these men were bound in their trousers, waistcoats, mantles, and turbans, and flung into the middle of the burning fiery furnace. However, because the furnace was made excessively hot, owing to the urgent command of the king, the men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were killed by the flame of the fire. But those 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the center of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar was terrified, and rose up hastily, and addressed his counselors, and asked, "Did we not throw 3 men bound into the middle of the burning fiery furnace?" They answered and said, "Certainly, king." He replied and said, "How then do I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and unimpaired? And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar approached the entrance of the burning fiery furnace, and called, and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the highest God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire, and the viceroys, the presidents, and the counselors of the king saw the men, and that the fire had not had power over their bodies, and that the hair of their heads was not singed, and their clothing not injured, and the smell of fire was not upon them. Nebuchadnezzar consequently exclaimed, "Thank the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his messenger to deliver his servants who trusted upon him, who disregarded the royal decree, and gave up their bodies, and would not serve, and would not worship any god but their own God. Therefore I now ordain a decree to every people, nation, and language, that whoever shall speak insultingly of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut to pieces, and their houses made a dunghill, because there is not another God who is able to deliver like him." The king afterwards promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babel. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages who reside on all the earth, perfect peace. It is a pleasure to me to declare the signs and wonders which the highest God has shown towards me. How great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders! He reigns king forever, and his government is for ages of ages. Chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages who reside on all the earth, perfect peace. It is a pleasure to me to declare the signs and wonders which the highest God has shown towards me. How great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders! He reigns king forever, and his government is for ages of ages. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at peace in my home and flourishing in my palace. I dreamed a vision and was depressed, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions terrified my head. Therefore I issued an order to bring before me all the scientists of Babel to explain the purport of my dream. Consequently, the engineers, the enchanters, the astronomers, and mathematicians came, and I related my dream to them, but they could not explain its meaning. At last, however, Daniel came before me, whom I have appointed Prince of Bel, after the name of my God, and in whom there is the spirit of the holy gods, to whom I related my dream. Belteshazzar, chief of the engineers, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is with you, and no secret is hidden from you, look at the vision I dreamed, and tell me its explanation, for the visions of my head on my bed were these. I looked, and saw a tree in the middle of the land, and it was very high. The tree grew and strengthened, and its top touched the skies, and it could be seen to the extent of the country. Its foliage was pleasant, with plenty of fruit, and food for all upon it. The beasts of the field sheltered under it, and the birds of the skies dwelt on its branches, and all animals were fed by it. I watched, looking at the vision of my head on my bed, and saw a holy watchman descend from the heavens. He spoke with authority and said, "Cut this tree down, cut off its branches, shake off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Drive the beasts from under it, and the birds from its boughs. However, leave its roots in the earth, with a fence of iron and brass, in the grass of the field, and moisten it with the dew of the skies, and let its lot be with the beasts of the earth. Change his heart from a human, and let the heart of a beast be given to him, and let 7 seasons pass over him. By decree of the watchers it is decreed, and by the command of the holy ones is the order about the affair, so that the living may learn that the highest rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whoever he decides, and raises the vilest of men over it. That was the vision I dreamed, I, Nebuchadnezzar. But you, Belteshazzar, tell the explanation, for all the scientists of my empire are not able to explain or to interpret it, so I called you to myself, because the spirit of the holy God is in you." Then Daniel, whom I had appointed Prince of Bel, was at first amazed on hearing it, and his thoughts troubled him. Therefore I, the king, addressed Belteshazzar, and said, "Do not let the dream or its explanation trouble you." But Belteshazzar replied and said, "May the portent of the dream be to those who hate, and its explanation of those who oppose you. The tree that you saw, that was great and strong, and whose top touched the skies, and that was seen all over the land, whose foliage was beautiful, and with plenty of fruit, with food for everyone upon it, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and the birds of the skies nestled on its boughs, it was yourself, king, who have grown and strengthened and increased in power, and touched the skies and govern the bounds of the land. And as you saw a holy watcher descend from the skies and command to fell the tree and destroy it, yet to leave its roots in the ground, and surrounded with iron and brass in the grass of the field, and to be moistened with dew from the skies, and its lot to be with the beasts of the field, until 7 seasons had passed over it, this is its explanation, and king, It is a decree of the highest proclaimed against my lord the king, and to drive you from among men. And you will be driven to be with the beasts of the field, and you shall eat the grass like oxen, and be wet with the dew of the skies. And 7 seasons shall pass over you, until you learn that the Most High rules over the empire of man, and gives it to whoever he decides. But since they were ordered to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom will be reserved for you until you understand that the heavens rule. Consequently, king, let my advice be pleasing to you, and redeem your sins by righteousness, and your faults by mercy to the wretched. Then there may be a continuance of your prosperity." All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months he was walking upon the royal palace of Babel, when the king exclaimed and said, "Is not this great Babel itself what I have built for the residence of my majesty by my might, and for the splendor of my magnificence?" Immediately after the king had spoken, a voice fell from the heavens. "King Nebuchadnezzar, it is proclaimed against you, the empire has gone from you, and you shall be driven out from mankind, and you shall stay with the beasts of the field. You shall eat grass like oxen, and 7 seasons shall pass over you, until you learn that the highest rules in the kingdoms of men, and gives them to whoever he decides." In that hour, at that moment, it was accomplished on Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven out from mankind, and ate grass like oxen, and he was wet with the drops of the skies rained upon him, until his hair grew like eagles, and his claws like birds. But at the end of the period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards the heavens, and my understanding returned to me, and I blessed the highest, and praised and honored him, living forever. For his government rules forever, and his dominion for ages of ages. For all the dwellers on earth may be considered as nothing, but he rules as with his army in the host of the heavens, and over the inhabitants of the earth, and there is none who can restrain his hand and say to him, "What are you doing?" At the same time my intellect returned to me, and the splendor of my empire, my honor, and glory came back to me, and my advisers and nobles came and fixed me in the empire, and they granted power to me. Consequently I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and honor the King of heaven, for all his acts are right and ways just, and he is able to depress those who walk in pride. Chapter 5. The king Belshazzar made a great supper for 1,000 of his nobles, and drank wine with the 1,000 lords. Belshazzar, while excited by wine, commanded to bring the cups of gold and silver which Nebuchadnezzar his ancestor had brought from the temple at Jerusalem, that the king, his nobles, his wives, and concubines might drink from them. So they brought the cups of gold which had been carried from the temple of the house of God at Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, with his wives and concubines, drank from them. They drank wine, and praised the gods of gold and silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared, and wrote opposite the lamp on the wall of the palace of the king. And the king watched the portion of a hand as it wrote. Then the brightness of the king changed, and his thoughts troubled him, and the joints of his loins were relaxed, and his knees struck one against the other. The king therefore cried loudly to bring the mathematicians, astronomers, and lawyers, who the king addressed, and said to the scientists of Babel, "Whatever man can read that writing, and explain its meaning, shall be clothed in purple, and have a chain of gold put on his neck, and shall be one of the 3 governors of the empire." Then all the king's scientists entered, but they were not able to read the writing or to explain the meaning of it to the king. King Belshazzar was consequently greatly troubled, and the brightness of his expression was changed, and his advisers were perplexed. Because of the consternation of the king and his counselors, the queen dowager came into the banqueting house and addressed the king and said, "May you live forever, king. Let not your thoughts trouble you or your expression change. There is a man in your empire in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the times of your ancestors, light and intelligence and science, like the science of the gods, was found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your ancestor, appointed him chief of the engineers, enchanters, astronomers, and mathematicians, because a spirit of light and knowledge and understanding in the explanation of dreams, the solution of problems, and loosening of difficulties was found in him, in Daniel, by the king, who appointed him as prince of Bel. So let Daniel be called, and he will explain the problem." Daniel was therefore brought before the king, when the king addressed him and said to Daniel, "Are you the Daniel of the sons of the captives who were brought by my ancestor from Judea? For I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and light and intelligence, and that supreme science is found in you. Now the scientists and enchanters have been brought to me to read that inscription and explain its meaning, but they are not able to explain the meaning of the phenomenon. But I have heard about you, that you could explain it clearly and solve its difficulties. Therefore, if you are able to read the writing and explain its meaning, you shall be clothed in purple, and a chain of gold be put on your neck, and be of the 3 who govern the empire." Daniel, however, answered and said to the king, "Keep your gifts to yourself, and your plunder for others. However, I will read the inscription for the king and explain its meaning. As regards yourself, king, the highest God gave your ancestor Nebuchadnezzar this empire, and greatness, and power, and majesty. And at the grandeur given to him, all the peoples, nations, and languages were trembling and fearing before him. Whoever he decided was murdered, and whoever he decided should live, they did live. And he promoted whoever he chose, and threw down whoever he determined. But when his heart became exalted, and his mind overbearingly insolent, he was driven from the throne of his empire, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from mankind, and lived with the beasts, and dwelt among the wild asses, eating grass like oxen, and was wet with the dripping rain of the skies, until that he learnt that the highest God rules over the kingdoms of men, and places whoever he decides over them. Yet you, Belshazzar, his descendant, although you knew all this, have not humbled your heart, but have exalted yourself against the Lord of the heavens, and have brought the cups of his house out to yourself. And you, your nobles, your wives and concubines, have drank wine from them, and honored the gods of silver and gold, brass, iron, wood, and stone, who neither see, nor hear, nor know. But you have not thanked the God in whose hand your breath is, and who knows all your ways, from whom also was sent the part of a hand that affixed this inscription. And this is the inscription that is affixed: Mina, Mina, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the explanation of the mandate. Mina, decided. God has decided about your kingdom and destroyed it. Tekel, weighed. You have been weighed in the scales and found insufficient. O farce! Your empire is Persianized and given to the Medes and Persians. Belshazzar commanded, and they clothed Daniel in scarlet, and put a chain of gold upon his neck, and proclaimed him as one of the 3 rulers of the empire. Belshazzar, king of the Kasdim, was slain on that night, and Darius the Mede seized the empire, being then 62 years of age. Chapter 6. It was decided for Darius to be president, but there were appointed 127 viceroys over the empire, who were to join in all the government. But over them were 3 premiers, of whom Daniel was the chief, to whom the viceroys were to give accounts, so that the king might not suffer loss. Daniel, however, himself was appointed the premier over the senators, because he had an enlightened mind, and the king set him over the whole empire. The superintendents and viceroys consequently looked out to find something against Daniel in reference to his administration, but they were unable to find an error or fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault could be found about him. These men consequently said, "We shall not find anything wrong against Daniel unless it is found in regard to the law of his God." These superintendents and viceroys therefore approached the king and said thus to him, "King Darius, may you live forever. All the superintendents, governors, and viceroys, counselors, and deputies of the empire have consulted together to pass a royal decree, and to proclaim an edict, that anyone who may seek a request from any god or man for 30 days, except from yourself, king, shall be flung into the den of lions. Therefore, king, confirmed the interdict and signed the record so that it cannot be altered according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be abolished." The king Darius accordingly confirmed the interdict. But although Daniel knew the record was signed, he went to his house and opened the window of his chamber towards Jerusalem. And kneeling thrice a day on his knees, he prayed and gave thanks, as he had done formerly, to God. These men then visited him and found Daniel asking and entreating of God as formerly. They consequently approached and asked the king about the interdict. "Did you not sign an interdict against any person who should ask anything from any god or man for 30 days, except, king, from you, that they should be thrown into the den of lions?" The king replied and said, "I did establish that, according to the law of the Medes and Persians that alters not." Then they responded and said to the king, "That Daniel, who is one of the sons of the captives, does not regard you, king, or the interdict that you signed, but prays 3 times a day, making his requests." When, however, the king heard this statement, he was exceedingly disturbed over it, and set his heart to deliver Daniel, and exerted himself till the departure of the sun to rescue him. Those men, however, pressed on to the king, and said to the king, "You know, king, the law of the Medes and Persians, that any interdict or decree confirmed by the king cannot be altered." The king consequently said, "Let it be done to Daniel." So they flung him into the den of lions. The king, however, addressed Daniel and said, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will deliver you." They then placed a large stone at the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his seal, and his nobles also sealed it, so that the trap might not be opened for Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace, and sat down fasting, and did not permit food to be brought before him, and sleep fled from him. The king consequently rose at early dawn, and went in anxiety to the lion's den. And when he approached to the den, he called in an agonized voice to Daniel. The king addressed him and said, "Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has the God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" When Daniel replied and said, "Yes, king, yes. May you live forever, king. God sent his messenger and closed the mouths of the lions who could not devour me, because I was innocent before him, and also against you, king, I have done no wrong." The king consequently was exceedingly glad about it, and commanded to release Daniel from the den. So they released Daniel from the den, and no injury was found upon him, for he had trusted in God. Then the king commanded, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and flung them into the den of lions, they, their children, and wives. And they had not arrived at the floor of the den before the lions seized them and broke all their bones. Darius the king afterwards wrote, "To all nations, peoples, and languages who dwell on all the earth, much peace to you. From myself, I issue a decree that in all the governments of my empire they must tremble and do reverence before the God of Daniel, for he is a living God, and exists, and his dominion cannot be destroyed, and his government is to eternity. He delivers and rescues, and produces signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth, for he delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." Thus Daniel prospered in the empire of Darius and the empire of Koresh the Persian. The end of chapters 1 through 6. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babel, Daniel dreamed a dream and a vision of his head upon his bed. He therefore wrote the dream of his head and related the matter. Daniel spoke and said, "I saw a vision in the visions of the night, and noted the four winds of the sky rush out upon the great sea. And four great beasts arose from the sea, different from one another. The first like a lion, with wings like an eagle. I continued watching until it folded its wings and alighted upon the land and stood on its feet like a man, and a human heart was given to it. Then I saw another beast, the second, like a bear, and it established a dominion. It had 3 tusks in its mouth amongst its teeth, and it was commanded to arise and devour much flesh. After that, as I was looking, I saw another like a leopard, and it had 4 wings like a bird on its back, and 4 heads, and life and a dominion were given to it. After that I looked and saw beings in the visions of the night. Then I noted a 4th beast, terrible, dreadful, and very strong, and it had iron teeth. It devoured much, and stamped and broke with its feet the rest. It was, however, different from all the previous beasts, and had 10 horns. While I was reflecting about the horns, I observed another little horn rise amongst them, but 3 of the former horns were pulled up before it. I also observed eyes, like human eyes, in this horn, and a mouth speaking magniloquently. I continued watching until the thrones were flung down, and the splendor of time sat. His robes glittered like snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was flames of fire, its wheels flashing fire. A river of fire proceeded and flamed before him. Thousands of thousands served him, and crowds on crowds stood before him. He sat to judge, and the records were opened. I was looking for that time because of the magniloquent words that the horn spoke. I continued looking until the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and given to the burning fire. But the rest of the beasts had a period of dominion, and a continuance of life was given to them for a period and a time. I continued watching in the vision of the night, and saw in the clouds of the heavens one who was like a son of man, who advanced to the splendor of time, and was introduced to him, and he gave him a dominion and glory and kingship, and all nations and peoples and languages bowed to him. His dominion will dominate forever and not pass away, and his empire will not be destroyed. The spirit of myself, Daniel, was pained in its sheath, and the thoughts of my head disturbed me. So I advanced to one of the bystanders, and determined to inquire of him what all this meant, and he replied to me and explained its purport. "Those 4 great beasts that you have seen are 4 empires which will be established on the earth. The saints of the Most High will afterwards take the empire and possess it forever and ever. Then I determined to ascertain about the 4th beast, why it was different from them. Terrible, dreadful, with teeth of iron and its claws of brass, devouring, trampling, and smashing the rest with its feet, and about the 10 horns on its head, and the one that sprung up when 3 fell before it. That horn that had eyes and a mouth, and spoke magniloquently, and whose expression was more haughty than its companions. So I continued watching, and that horn made war with the saints, and defeated them, until the splendor of time arrived, and gave judgment for the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the empire. Then he said, "The fourth beast is a fourth empire on earth. It will be different from all the empires, and devour all the earth, and thrash it, and break it. And the 10 horns of the empire are 10 kingdoms that will arise, but another will arise after them, and it will differ from these kingdoms, and will depose 3 kings. It will also speak in opposition to the highest, and persecute the saints of the Most High, and determine to change the times and the laws. And they will be given into his hand for a period, and periods, and half a period. Then the tribunal will sit, and its dominion will be terminated, and destroyed, and abolished completely, when the empire, and dominion, and grandeur of the empire under the whole heavens will be given to the holy people of the Most High. His empire is an eternal empire, and all dominions shall be subject to and serve him. There is the end of these affairs." I myself, Daniel, reflected greatly, was troubled, and my thoughts disturbed me, but I kept the matter in mind. Chapter 8. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the former one that appeared to me. And I looked at the vision. The vision came to me when I was at the palace of Shushan, which is in the province of Elam, and it seemed in the vision that I went to the river Aulai, and lifting my eyes in the vision, I looked and saw a ram stand by the river with 2 horns, and the horns were upright, and one higher than the other, but the higher grew up last. I watched the ram pushing west and north and southward. No animal could stand before him, and none could escape out of his power, but he did as he pleased and became great. And I continued to look out, and saw a he-goat come from the west above the surface of the earth, and not touching the ground. And the goat had a strong horn between the eyes, and he went at the ram with the 2 horns that I saw standing by the river, and rushed at him with furious force. Thus I saw him approach close to the ram, and he struck the ram and broke his 2 horns, for the ram had no power to stand before him. So he flung him to the ground and stamped on him, and the ram had no escape from his power. Then the he-goat became very great, but when at his full strength his great horn was broken, and instead of it 4 powers arose from the 4 winds of the heavens, and from one of them came out a little single horn, which became splendidly great against the south, and against the east, and against the splendor. Then it exalted itself to fight with the heavens, and threw down some of its army and some of the stars, and trod on them. It even stood up against the commander of that army, and took from him the perpetual offering, and threw down his holy dwelling. And an army was given to it against the perpetual, for wrongdoing, and it threw down truth to the ground, yet it was active and prospered. Then I heard a saint speak, and ask another saint, "Can you say for how long the vision is, and the desolation of the wicked is granted, during which the holy army will be trodden down?" And he replied to him, "For 2,300 evening mornings, after which the sanctuary will be sanctified." And while I, Daniel, looked at the vision and tried to understand it, I saw something like the appearance of a man stand before me, and I heard a human voice near the Aulai, and it called and said, "Gabriel, make this man understand the appearance." So he came to my side, but I was terrified at his approach, and fell on my face, when he said to me, "Understand, son of Adam, that the vision is for a terminable period." While he was speaking with me, I fell into a stupor with my face to the earth, but he approached and raised me when I stood up, and he said to me, "I will inform you what will come in the future, what will come at the appointed time. The ram that you saw possessing 2 horns are the kingdoms of Media and Persia. And the he-goat is the kingdom of Ionia, and the great horn that was between his eyes is the first king. But he will be broken, and 4 kingdoms will arise instead of him from the nation, but not with his vigor. And at the end of those kingdoms, when the offenses are expiated, a king of fierce expression and who understands policy will arise with mighty power, but not his own power, and be wonderfully corrupt, but prosper, and be energetic and destroy the mighty and holy people. And his policy and diplomacy will increase with his power, so that he will enlarge himself to his own mind, and destroy many by treachery. Then he will stand up against the Prince of Princes, and be broken without a hand. Be sure the vision of the evening morning that you were told is true, but shut up that vision, for it is far distant. Then I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for days. I afterwards arose and did the king's business, but I was astonished at the revelation and could not understand it. Chapter 9. In the 1st year of Darius, son of Cushrush, of the Median race, who became king over the empire of the Kasdim, in the 1st year of his reign, I, Daniel, ascertained from the records the years that the Lord had said to Jeremiah the preacher should pass for the completion of the ruin of Jerusalem, 70 years. So I turned my face to seek Almighty God by prayer and supplication, with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. I also prayed to the Lord my God, and gave thanks, and said, O Lord, the great and terrible God, who keeps the covenant with those who love him and keep his commands, we have offended and sinned and revolted and turned from your instructions and decrees. And we have not listened to your servants the preachers, who spoke in your name to our kings, princes, and fathers, and to all the people of the country. Righteousness is yours, Almighty, but to us shame of face as at this day, to the men of Judah and the population of Jerusalem, and to all Israel, whether near or afar, in every country where they have fled, because of the sin they have sinned against you. Almighty, with us, our kings, our princes, and fathers who sinned against you, is shame of face. But with our Almighty God are pities and mercies, although we have rebelled against him, and have not listened to the voice of the Lord our God, to walk in his paths that he prepared before us, by the means of his servants the preachers. And all Israel has transgressed your laws, and gone away so as not to listen to your voice. Consequently, the curse has been poured upon us, and the threat that was written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we sinned against him. And he has confirmed his words that he spoke against us and against our rulers who governed us, that he would bring upon us great sufferings, such as were never heard of under all the heavens, and which occurred at Jerusalem, as they had been written in the laws of Moses. All those sufferings have come upon us. Yet we appeased not the face of the ever-living God by turning from our sins and by comprehending the truth. Consequently, the ever-living watched for the suffering and brought it upon us. For the ever-living God is absolutely right in all the acts that he does, but we do not listen to his voice. But now, Almighty God, who brought your people from out of the land of the Mitzrayim with the strong hand, and made yourself renowned as at this day, we have offended, we have done wrong. Almighty, although you are right in what you have done, turn away your anger and wrath, I pray, from your city Jerusalem, your holy hill, because by our offenses and the sins of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people are a reproach amongst all around them. So now listen, our God, to the prayer of your servant and to his entreaty, and let your face shine upon your desolate sanctuary. For my sake, Lord, incline your ear, my God, and hear. Open your eyes, and see the desolations of the city upon which your name was invoked, because not for our righteousness do we let our entreaties fall before your face, but because of your many mercies. Almighty, listen! Almighty, pardon! Almighty, hear and act. Delay not for your own sake, my God, because your name was invoked over your city and over your people. Then while I was speaking and praying and confessing my faults and the faults of my people Israel, and letting my entreaty fall before the Lord my God, on account of the holy hill of my God, then while I was speaking out and praying, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the previous vision when exhausted, approached me about the time of the evening offering, and entering, spoke and said to me, Daniel, I have come to teach you to understand. At the beginning of your entreaty the command was issued, and I am come to say you are highly honored. So reflect upon the affair, and reflect upon the revelation. 70 weeks are fixed upon your people and upon the holy city for all their revolts, and to expiate their offenses, and to expiate their sin, and to bring forward eternal righteousness, and to accomplish the vision and prophecy and the Messiah, the holiest of the holy. So know and comprehend that from the issue of the order to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah arrives is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be restored and built with streets and moat in times of distress. And after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be slain, and none support him. After that, the city and the sanctuary will be desolated by a dominating people who are brought on, but its end will be with a torrent, and its abolition by war. The desolations are fixed, but the covenant will be guarded by many for a week, and in the middle of the week he will make the sacrifice and the offering to cease, and the loathsome brute will desolate to the extreme. But at last a wound will be given to the desolators. Chapter 10. In the 3rd year of Karush, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was appointed by name Prince of Bel, and the purport is true and very certain, so understand the matter that was explained to him by a revelation. During those days, I, Daniel, was in depression for a period of 3 weeks. I ate no pleasant food, and flesh or wine did not enter my mouth, nor did I lubricate myself until the completion of the 3 weeks' period. And on the 24th day of the 1st month, while I was on the banks of the great river Hiddekel, I raised my eyes and looked, and saw a man clothed in trousers, and his waist belted with gold of Uphaz. His body was like a Tarshish gem, and his face like the gleam of lightning, and his eyes like lamps of fire, and his arms and legs like the glitter of bright brass, and the sound of his speech like the sound of a crowd. And I, Daniel, alone saw the appearance, for the persons who were with me did not see the appearance, but a great faintness fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves, and I was left alone. So I watched this great appearance, although there was no strength left in me, and my energy was destroyed, and I retained no power. Yet I heard the sound of his words. But when I heard the sound of his words, I was laid on my face in a stupor with my face to the earth. But I perceived a hand approach me, and I staggered on to my knees and the palms of my hands. Then he said to me, Daniel, you fully accepted man, attend to the words which I speak to you, and stand upon your feet, for I have now been sent to you. When he spoke this speech to me, I stood up trembling, and he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you gave your heart to examine and humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, so I have come to speak with you. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia stood opposing me for 21 days. But Michael, one of the first princes, came and helped me, and I was relieved then from the restraint of the governors of Persia, And I have come to inform you of what will happen to your own people in future times, because the vision is yet at a distance." And as he spoke these words to me, I hung my face to the earth and was silent. But I saw whilst silent a man touch my lips, when I opened my mouth and spoke, and said to the stander before me, "Sir, by this appearance my anguish has returned upon me, and my strength has failed. So how can your servant talk with you, sir, when I have now no strength to stand by myself, and I have no breath left in me?" Then one with the appearance of a man touched me again, and said, "Fear not, you chosen man. Peace to you. Be bold, be bold." And when he spoke with me, I was encouraged, and replied, "Let my Lord speak, for I am reassured." Then he said, "I will teach you what will come to you, but now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I am gone you will see the prince of Eon come. However, I will inform you of the record in the book of truth, for there is no one who helps me about these things except Michael your prince." Chapter 11. And I stood up in the first year of Darius the Mede to encourage and strengthen him. But now I will remind you of the fact. There will yet be 3 kings stand up in Persia, and a 4th, rich, far richer than all of them, and he will embolden himself in his wealth. The whole will excite the kingdom of Ion. Then a powerful king will arise and rule with great dominance and do as he desires. But as he stands, his empire will be shattered and divided to the 4 winds of the heavens, but not for his posterity, and not like the dominion that he ruled, for his empire will be uprooted for others than his own. And the king of the south, who was one of his generals, will be strong and bolder than he, and rule with a wide dominion made from his empire. But at the conclusion of the years they will associate, and the daughter of the king of the south will be brought to the king of the north to make rectifications. But she will not retain the strength of her arm, and his arm will not continue, but she will be betrayed with her attendants and her parent, and her supporter in those times. But a shoot from her roots will stand in his position, and go against the army, and come to the fortress of the king of the north, and assail and seize, and also carry off captive their gods with their princes, and beautiful furniture of silver and gold into the Mitzrayim. And he will endure more years than the king of the north, who will advance to the dominions of the king of the south, but return to his own country, and vigorously exert himself, and collect a numerous army, and advance and flood, and pass onwards, and arouse himself to his full strength. But the king of the south will be furious, and advance and fight with him, with the king of the north, who had arranged the numerous host. But the crowd will be given into his power, and the crowd will be carried away. Then his spirit will be exalted, and he will defeat numbers, but not succeed. For the king of the north will return and array a greater number than the former, and at the end of periods of years will advance with a great army and numerous cavalry. And at the same time many will arise against the king of the south, and the fierce fellows of your people will rise up to accomplish this vision, but will fail. Then the king of the north will come and pile up an embankment, and capture the fortified cities and the arms of the south, for his choice army will not be able to stand, and none have power to resist. But the assailant will do as he desires to him, for none can stand before him. But he will establish himself with destruction in his hand, in the glorious land, and turn his face to advance with all the power of his empire, and his squadrons with him, and succeed. But a daughter of women will be given to him to destroy him, but she will not attain or come to him. Then he will set his face to the coasts, and capture many. But a prince will stop his incursions. Indeed, he will turn his insolence on himself, when he will return to the capital of his own country, and stumble, and fail, and not be found. There will then succeed to his officer and imposer of taxes upon the honor of the empire, but in a few days he will be destroyed, yet neither in anger nor war. When a mean fellow will succeed to his office, to whom they will not confer the honor of the empire, but he will come in by briberies, and obtain the empire by intrigue, and with force of a flood they will be overwhelmed and broken before him, and also the princely treaty. And he will work for himself by crafty negotiations, and advance and strengthen himself by a few people, and by peace he will bring his government to prosperity, and do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, by that, and distribute wealth and prosperity to it, and his policy will be against physical force for a period. But when he is strong and hearty, he will assail the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south will contend in the war with a very great force, but will not succeed. For he will contrive plots against him, and those in his own pay will destroy him, and his army will be overwhelmed, and many fall wounded. And the intention of the two kings will be to do mischief, and they will talk lies at one table, but not succeed. For the appointed end is at its period, but he will return towards his own country with great wealth, when his heart will assail the holy covenant, and effect his purpose, and return to his own country. After a period he will come again, and advance to the south, but he will not meet with success as he did formerly, for the ships of the Ketuvim will come and assail him, so he will retreat and be furious, and work against the holy covenant. Then he will turn and favor those who abandon the holy covenant, and arms will succeed with him, and he will defile the sanctuary of the capital, and they will abolish the perpetual sacrifice, and establish the desolating brute. Then the revolters from the covenant will apostatize to defilements, but the people who acknowledge God will be bold and act. But the seducers of the people who control the many will perish by the sword, by flame, and in captivity, and by slaughter for a period. But in their fall they will be helped with some assistance, and many will be joined to them by policy, and some of the teachers will fall to refine them, and purify and beautify them for the appointed time, for the period is future. Therefore the king will effect his object, and exalt himself, and enlarge himself like a god, and against the God of gods, uttering astonishing things. Yet he will prosper until his insolence is complete, for what is decreed will be done. And he will neither reverence the God of his fathers, nor care for the delight of women, or care for any god, for he will exalt himself above all. But in his place he will honor the God of force, and to that God whom his ancestors did not acknowledge, he will pay honor with gold and silver and precious stones and luxuries, and make strong fortresses to the strange God whom he admires. He will extend his glory, govern many, and allot the land for sale. But at the end of the period, the king of the south will contend with him, and the north will rush against him with chariots and cavalry and many ships, and advance to his territories, and flood and overflow, and arrive at the glorious land where many will fall, but these will escape his hand, Edom and Moab, and the capital of the Beni-Ammon. But he will extend his hand to the territories, and the land of the Mitzrayim will not be a refuge for them, for he will control her treasures of gold and silver, and all the luxuries of the Mitzrayim and Lubim and Cushim will be at his feet, when reports from the east and the north will disturb him, and he will proceed in great fury to destroy and devote many, and pitch his palatial tent between the seas on the glorious holy hill, then go to his reaping, and none can save him. Chapter 12. And at that period, Michael, the great prince, who defends the children of your people, will stand up, and a period of distress will come, such as has not come from the existence of the nation to that period, but in that period your people shall escape, all who are written in the book of record, and many sleeping in the dust of the earth will awaken, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting shame and contempt. But the teachers will shine like lights in space, and those who have led many to righteousness like stars forever and ever. So you, Daniel, conceal the events and seal the record until the fixed period, when many will travel and knowledge will be increased. I, Daniel, looked again and saw 2 sentinels stand, one on this bank of the river, and the other on that bank of the river. And the man who was clothed in trousers, who was upon the waters of the river, asked, How long is it to the end of these wonders?" Then I listened to the man clothed in trousers, who was on the waters of the river, as he held up his right and left hands to the heavens, and swore by the eternal life, that in a period and a half, and when they have completely broken to pieces the power of the holy people, all these would be accomplished. I heard but did not understand, so I asked, "My Lord, what will come after this?" But he replied, "Go away, Daniel, because that is hidden and sealed until the fixed time. Many will purify and cleanse and refine themselves, but the rebellious will be wicked, and none of the wicked will understand. But the teachers will understand, and from the period when the perpetual sacrifice is taken away, and the desolating brute is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Happy will be the hopeful, who attain to the 1,335 days. But you, go until the period, for you shall rest and stand in your place at the end of the times." The end of the book of Daniel. Recording by Mark Penfold.